put themselves out there. They volunteered to be in the military. They volunteered to put themselves in harm's way. They looked after each other. Didn't matter the color of your skin or the religion. I didn't see any overt, prejudices in the military, to be honest. I know they're there. But man, when you're getting shot at, it goes away real fast.
Let's impact some men today. I think we're going to do a great job.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Modern Man Podcast, where we appreciate the time and we ask you to share these episodes with a friend if you continue to get value from them. If this is your first time, make sure you hit that subscribe button to get a new episode each and every single week, and leave us a rating to let us know how we're doing, because we're on a mission of connecting men in pursuit of their potential. And we do that by cultivating community, embracing discomfort, and putting wind in each other's sails. And I'm excited to get some wind in our sails today from veteran, an angel investor, advisor, CEO of Phunware, Randall Crowder, joining us out of Austin, Texas. Randall, man, thanks for being on the show.
No, I really appreciate it. And honestly, we were talking about this before you hit record. I commend you for what you're doing. You said it, it was special. It was like so many people, they're scared of their own vulnerability and they're scared of kind of putting themselves out there. And the sad part is, it's not just masculinity or any of that stuff. I mean, there's a real mental health crisis that is not just full on suicidal. It's just depression. It's anxiety. It's not knowing where you fit, not knowing what to do, not knowing how to get off go. And I saw a lot of that in the military. I still see it a lot, just in the private sector. And so, these kind of platforms are so important. And I know that, a lot of these are labors of love. We talked about you putting the card down to start, to pay for venues. I know what that's like, being all in. When you push your chips in, that's a whole different level of motivation. And so, I think it's really special that you're pushing in your chips to help others. So thank you for having me on.
Man, it's an absolute pleasure. And I just want to make sure I say thank you for the service, brother, because it very much is appreciated. And I want to make sure that the audience actually gets a chance to meet you and get the introduction from you in your own words. So please take the floor, let folks know who you are, what you do, and then we can kind of hop a little bit into some of your story.
Yeah, man, it's a weird story. I always tell people I've spent my career collecting jobs I'm probably not qualified for. I'm an entrepreneur by necessity, not by design. Grew up in Austin, Texas. Went to the military by way of West Point. Did it before 9/11, so I can't claim that I was brave or I knew what I was getting into. 9/11 was my senior year, and I still remember walking into my first class after the towers fell, and we had this like cartoonish colonel, big jaw, gravelly voice, and he kind of looks around as we were all sitting down, kind of shook from what we just saw, and he goes, "Well, cadets, you're all going to war." I was like, "Ooh." That's a wake-up call, because we didn't think we were going to have to do anything going into West Point. Rumsfeld was downsizing the military. A lot of people were getting paid to get out of the military, but best laid plans went out the window. Served a couple tours. Was fortunate enough to come home safe and sound. Got my MBA here in Austin at Macombs, and then just started a bunch of things. I think being in the military for me, I felt like I was behind the power curve. I felt like everybody else was doing big things, doing billion-dollar deals on Wall Street. And, what skills do I have? Like, I can raid a house, I can do movement to contact, I can react to an ambush, but, what am I going to give to, the financial industry or innovation or, anything else for that matter? And so I immediately kind of just hit the ground running. So we can talk about it in a little bit, but, got into an angel network. Ended up taking that angel network over because, I'm not a really good follower. And so ended up just kind of saying, hey, look, y'all got some problems. You know what? I'll fix it. And so I actually turned that into the most active angel network in the country. Spun a venture fund out of that, started my own venture fund focused on tech-enabled healthcare. So we invested in healthcare startups that were using technology to make healthcare better or more efficient for that matter. And then ironically, when I was doing the angel network, one of my first seed rounds was a $1.5 million seed round to start Phunware back in 2009. Fast forward 10 years, I put about $3 million into the last private round for Phunware before we went public. and was only going to be an investor and help them think through some things around crypto. But the founder, Alan Natowski, who was the CEO at the time, said, "Hey, we're doing a lot of big things. You've been doing the venture capital route for 10 years. Do you want to kind of get back into the saddle and build this thing with me?" And so, I think at that time, when you're a VC, you're a backseat driver. Maybe if the investment's a little wonky, you're riding shotgun. And if you're going, off the road, you're going to grab the wheel. But if you're investing in the right things and the right entrepreneurs, you're a backseat driver. And I don't like backseat driving. I like driving. And so, I was ready to, I think, get back into a company and go all in on something. And so joined up with Phunware and been doing that ever since. And it's been a blast.
Yeah, man. And you've been crushing it. And we could talk more about Phunware in a little bit, but I want to go back to what you mentioned senior year, and because you talk about, all right, cadets, looks like you're going to war and the whole plan's change. I'm interested to know what was your mindset like in that, and for you and your classmates, and how did your curriculum change while in your schooling? Like, how did, I guess, the nature of your trajectory, which was clearly derailed, but how did that nature kind of mature itself in the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah. It's kind of like, I guess it's that like 5 stages of grief. Like, you kind of don't believe it at first, and then you kind of like work through it. I will say again, I'm always honest and transparent. There was probably one moment about 3, so you're going to war, right? But you don't really know if you're going yet. So this is, 2001. We graduate from West Point in 2002. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on in Afghanistan kind of after the towers fell, but before we actually invaded, and then also before we invaded Iraq. And so, there was a lot of preparation. There was kind of a lot of like, hey, this is you're training for real now. But I'll tell you, small diversion into kind of what's happening today. I'm shocked by what's happening in Ukraine. And I'm married to a Ukrainian. I have a daughter on the way who will be half Ukrainian. And man, the Ukrainians there's some bad, I'll edit myself out so in case kids are listening. But what they're doing over there is incredible. And I can watch like troop movements, Russian troop movements, whether it's armored or dismounted, and they are not prepared at all. They are not trained. They are not prepared. They are not equipped. We would blow through the Russian army in a weekend. Like, the American fighting force is second to none. China, Russia, it doesn't matter who it is. We've been waging war for 30 years. You can go all the way back to the 90s. I say that to say that our training is dialed in. So not a lot changed. It just got real. So when we were going, when I went to, from airborne school to Ranger school to, OC, whatever you do, your basic course as an officer, to even, training at NTC in California or JRTC in Louisiana, it's very real because it's being run by people who have seen combat. They either saw Desert Storm, some of them, all the way back to the colonel I was talking about in class. I think he had jumped into Grenada. We just have people with so much experience offering that experience up to train young men and women to be the best they can be and be the best warfighters there can be. But unlike Russia, we also teach humanity. And so you saw this in Afghanistan and Iraq, on day one, you might be, a trigger puller, but on day 2, you might be handing out candy to kids. And that's what makes the American, military forces so special, is that they're very good tactically at what they do, but they don't lose sight of why they're doing it. And you see that in Ukraine right now, where, what the Russians are doing and the atrocities. Granted, we haven't always been great at that either. We have Abu Ghraib, we have My Lai back in Vietnam, but for the most part, I am blown away by the training that we received, by the humanity that was never lost in the mission, and by like almost the accountability to each other. I saw kids who were barely 18 negotiating ceasefires with tribal leaders. It's amazing. Then you see them, running around playing grab ass back in the wire, but when they step outside the wire and they put the gear on, they grow up fast. And so I don't think we felt unprepared at all. It was a pretty special experience to watch people, get trained and execute their training well.
Yeah, that's amazing because it's almost like the credence of where they say, you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to the level of your preparation. And, my friend has mentioned before, he served in the army 10 years in Germany, and he was saying, a lot of it's hurry up and wait, but trust your training and trust your superiors because they've done this before. They know what's going on, and you lean into that. You mentioned,
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, please.
I was going to say the camaraderie aspect, because I know you mentioned the importance of teamwork and working together towards an objective. How has that experience in the military translated to the benefits in the business world? Because we have a lot of veterans that come out, and you mentioned before, like, how do my skills adapt to the real world, where you actually might have that leg up because of some of that experience? How has that been for you as you've transitioned, getting your MBA and then working in business?
I think it's humbling. I will say, if anybody hasn't ever read it, I don't get any royalties off of this, but it's a Startup Nation, and it's all about how Israel uses service to fuel innovation, which is kind of odd. But I mean, everybody, everyone has to serve in Israel, and arguably, not a political or cultural statement, but they are surrounded by, their mortal enemies, if you will. We don't understand what that's like being in America. Like, America is uninvadable, period. We have all the resources we need. We have crazy natural borders. We don't understand what it's like to be Ukraine and have somebody just roll into our country, and if you don't fight, you die. Israel's been living with that for a long time, but Palestinians live with that as well from Israel. So when you're in such close proximity to that existential threat, it has an influence on you. But what Startup Nation does is explain how that role in service and that role in defense has helped inspire their innovation and their entrepreneurial ecosystem. America hasn't figured that out yet. It's really sad to see. And I think we talked about this in the very beginning about mental health. A lot of people that serve get out of the military and they don't know what to do, and they feel lost, and they've lost that camaraderie, especially if you've been a warfighter. There's nothing like the camaraderie you get when you're deployed and you're fighting for each other. Yes, you have a flag on your shoulder, and it's popular to say you're doing it for, God and country, but you're doing it for the person next to you, hands down. When you lose that, you lose a part of yourself if you don't have a strong sense of self. And I don't know that we teach that well enough when you're transitioning out the military, that what you learned is what you learned. You're not just good because you had 4 buddies next to you or 30 buddies next to you. You're good because you have skill sets that played well with the whole, but those skill sets don't disappear just because you're not on the team anymore. If you can throw a ball, you can throw a ball even when you're not playing anymore. You go out and play with the kids Thanksgiving and you're throwing the ball around, you still got an arm, you still got a cannon, right? So I think what we have to understand is when you're getting out of the military, you understand organizational leadership, you understand how to act under pressure, you understand how to lead, you understand asymmetric thinking. There is just skill sets that are so great for private industry. But there's also this really interesting thing that I saw that maybe it taught me that good ideas come from anywhere. And so when we went into, in 1990s, you're fighting Desert Storm, all the training out of that was this force on force against large Russian troop movements or large Chinese troop movements. And then we go to Mogadishu, we go to Afghanistan, and we go to Iraq. And guess what? None of that training works. It's like urban fighting, super, asymmetric, and nobody had really experienced that before, except for maybe Vietnam, but that was in a forestry situation, not a town. And so we had to adapt quickly, and we had to learn quickly, and you had to push all of that responsibility and leadership down to the smallest unit level. So squads were making material, meaningful decisions that impacted tactics and strategy. And so I kept seeing really good ideas and really great leadership come from just the most unlikely sources. And it's always reminded me that you got to give everybody a chance to participate in the decision-making process, the research process, the feedback process. And I've taken that with me to Phunware, where it's sometimes the quietest engineer or that introvert, they might have the best ideas. Just because you're loud doesn't mean you know what's going on. Mm-hmm. And I saw that all the time in the military, where you'd see these really interesting, exciting innovations. When we were over there in Iraq in 2003, they had just started using basically infrared to trigger their IEDs. And so these mechanics, now DARPA is over here in the States investing in like ground penetrating radar, super cool Star Wars type things to defeat these IEDs. And there were some mechanics that just said, you know what, we're going to weld rebar to the front of the Humvee, dangle some chains in front of it. And so if we're going to hit an IED, we're going to hit an IED, but let's trigger it ahead of the cab. Mm-hmm. And so now, granted, that only worked for about 6 months, and they started learning to daisy chain them. But initially, it was just really cool innovation. They were like, look, we don't need some $100,000 ground penetrating radar. We're just going to use metal and chains. And then we'll basically protect the cab by triggering the IED before the actual Humvee hits it. And so that kind of innovation is everywhere. And so as a leader, you got to remember that everybody, needs to have a say, and you got to cultivate that kind of feedback loop.
Man, yeah. I mean, it's amazing that you were able to take those skills, transition into the business world, because we've heard over and over again, it's hard to see the forest when you're among the trees. Well, for a leader, when you're looking at the forest, you might not be able to really see the trees. And there's sometimes those voices, those small voices, that quiet engineer, they're in the trenches. They do it every day. They know the struggles of the everyday attack. So they could probably lead up the chain of command, let you know what their environment's like, and maybe provide some of that innovativeness.
I've always said, one of the things that, I try to lead with is I don't have to be right. I want to get it right. Like, you'll never catch me driving around lost if I can pull over and ask for directions. No way. I don't care if it's a woman giving me directions. I don't care if it's my kid giving me directions. I don't care if it's a man giving me directions. Red, white, pink, Asian, American. I have no prejudices, especially when you can help me get it right. Mm-hmm. So if you can help me be better than I was without you, hands down, I got no ego involved in getting it right. And so I think leaders can't afford not to ask people for help. Because if somebody in your chain of command has a really good idea, that can make you that can make your business. It can make your pitch. It can make your it could bring people home alive. You need to surface that kind of insight.
Absolutely. I mean, that's almost like the Red Hot Cheeto, where it wasn't a janitor that came up with the idea and the CEO was like, absolutely. And that's where it's all about. You never know where the good ideas are going to come from.
Flaming hot Cheetos.
Yeah, which are delicious, by the way. I want to talk about really quick mentorship and also mentors versus role models, because you have a distinct difference between the two. And I couldn't believe when I read that you said you never had a mentor before. For someone who's done so many amazing things, kudos, brother, right? Because we talk all the time. It's like, okay, if you want a shortcut, if you want to get somewhere, find the mentor, someone who's done it before, and have them pour into you. But I want to talk more, I guess, on your view of the mentor, how that relationship is, where you get your information from, and what's the difference between a mentor and a role model?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think let's start at the end and work our way back. I think the difference is access. You have access to a mentor, you don't have access to a role model. You want to emulate a role model. You want to actively learn from a mentor. I don't think I'm probably doing certain people a service by saying I never had a mentor. I certainly had people mentor me, kind of the action, verb of it, but I never had the noun of it, a mentor. So I've been mentored. I never had a mentor. So a lot of people have helped me along the way. I certainly did not do it on my own. But I think what I lacked, and this is probably the insight that I would provide others, is my own fault. So when I was investing, I always asked my entrepreneur, I made them, but I politely asked them, do this professional coaching. And it was always because it's a lonely road being an entrepreneur. When you're starting stuff, you don't want to talk to your family because you don't want them to think that, you can't make it. You don't want to talk to your employees because you don't want them to think you can't make it. And you don't want to talk to your investors because you don't want them to think you can't make it. And, you're only telling yourself you might not be able to make it. And that negative self-talk is debilitating sometimes. And so who can you talk to? And sometimes you don't even want to talk to your peers because we have that natural competitive streak. And so professional coaching is important and kind of functions like a mentor for hire in a way, because it's a sounding board for you. I tried to take my own, advice, and I would do it a couple of times as well. And this woman told me one time, she was like, get over it. You're just not going to have a mentor. Be a mentor to other people. But, your problem is it's a two-way street. Yes, you want a mentor, but if you don't open yourself up, mentors aren't walking around just throwing themselves at people, like being like, you need my help, come here. Like, they're looking for that social contract, that relationship where they can take you under their wing, but where you tuck in under their wing. She was like, you're out here flapping. You're like, no, you're like, I'm not going near that person. He's going to take us both down, And so I've always kind of, and it wasn't by design, I've always kind of been a self-starter. And I'm like, well, I'll figure it out. And, I'll run through walls to figure it out. And she said, you got to be careful with that, because people will think you've got it handled, or that you don't need the help. And they'll go elsewhere where someone is more vulnerable. We started off talking about that. If you want a mentor, you need to present yourself as more vulnerable and be willing to put yourself out there and ask to be mentored. Don't wait for a mentor to come to you and be like, hey, Ted, I see you out here hurting, let me come and change your life. Now, occasionally that does happen. There's some amazing people out there. Angels walk among us. But more often than not, you're going to have to court your own mentor. You're going to have to put yourself out there and be like, look, I'm struggling. I'm trying to do that now, actually. There's a few people in my life now that I've made it a point to be like, let me pick your brain. I don't want anything. I just want to really hear your story. I want to learn from you. I want some insight. I think that's also important as well. It shouldn't always be a transaction. You shouldn't, hey, I want you to be my mentor, but I'm really looking for a job, huh? It's like, you want that to be a very clean, very transparent relationship, so that there's trust. And that there's that vulnerability on both sides. They're going to entrust you with a lot of their knowledge. You're going to trust them with a lot of that wisdom. And it's not just a transaction where you're trying to get an in or an introduction or something else. So I think I'm trying to do that better as I get older. But when I was younger, I was just hard charging. Like, show no fear, rub some dirt in it, walk it off, no weakness. I'm going to run through a wall and I'm going to make it happen. And I think that pushed away any opportunity for mentorship I really would have ever had.
Yeah, I could relate in terms of being a self-starter and like, okay, I could just figure this out. I can learn it. I'm a self-learner. YouTube University. Let's go. Yep. And it's great to kind of learn it, but then you get to a point where, especially as I'm kind of elevating more, I'm starting to delegate for my business. And I'm like, okay, it's great that I know this stuff. Had I had a mentor maybe teach me how to outsource earlier, I would have saved hours and hours of time, because I hire someone to do something, they do it better than I do because they've done it longer. And that's me putting the ego aside on that.
But I struggle with that. It's like, if you think about, school, and it's like some of that foundational stuff, are you learning the foundational stuff, or are you learning how to learn? And so like, sometimes like I wonder about like, I could have somebody go to the gym for me. I could pay somebody to do it, but is it going to really benefit me? Like, I could have them log in under my name and I could pull a record and say, look, I go to the gym, look at my membership, all these check-ins, but am I getting any stronger? No. And so, but it's a balance, right? I think, you probably learned a lot doing it yourself and failing. And yes, someone could have done it easier, but maybe that's not the right answer either. And so I struggle with that too. Somebody who's mentored me in the past, a gentleman named Admiral Inman, former deputy director of the CIA, he always kind of couched it like this. And he said, one of the hardest challenges type A personalities have is figuring out the art of delegation. And he's like, you will, especially when you're an entrepreneur, because like you have to wear so many hats. And biggest challenge you will have is there's a task, and you can get an A at that task. Mm-hmm. And you hire somebody and you want them to do that task, but they can only get like a B. But that might be okay because that frees you up to go somewhere else where you can get an A+, and that A+ is more valuable than all of that activity for the A's and the B's. Mm-hmm. And so understanding that it's okay if someone does something not as good as you, or maybe just different than you, even if it's ultimately not as good as you would have done it, that's okay. Because you can't scale yourself. You have to be able to build a team. And sometimes, maybe they don't do a good job the first time, but maybe they'll learn and they'll get better, and you got to resource them and train them and support them and tell them that failure is okay. That's a hard thing for people to get used to. And you got to be careful with that. I think it's the same thing probably for parenting. Like, you don't want to be impatient. You want to let people learn and let people fail and create that safe space, but also push them. So, I think that we have to remember that, as men for this, but as women too, just that determination to be the best version of yourself shouldn't quiet somebody else's journey, but should amplify their journey as well. And I think that's always going to be a challenge.
I'd say that actually segues perfectly into the next question I had, because talking about building a team, and I've seen this with, okay, if they don't get it right the first time, maybe, okay, I would take the responsibility and say, maybe I didn't articulate my vision correctly, or maybe I didn't articulate the intentionality in terms of what I was hoping to do. And it's also, when you're managing multiple people, you mentioned technology is great, allowing us to access people and also allowing us to kind of communicate from afar, but also that emotional intelligence on everybody receives things differently, right? The way I talk to one person is not the way I talk to the other. The way my wife receives information is not the way, members of my team receive information. Some people need to hear it direct. Other people need a little bit of sugar with the way they get it.
Boy, do I know it.
How important is that, man?
When we stop recording, you can tell me how your wife receives information, because I need all the help I can get with that. So it is, one of the things I actually heard that was really interesting on that topic. Have you ever done like a Myers-Briggs test?
Yeah, I have.
So a lot of people talk about that, and there's I forget his last name, Thomas Klinkman, conflict theory, or Klingman or something. But, Myers-Briggs is the most popular one. Mm-hmm. And, you take all these, for those of the people that are watching, that you take all these questions and they're really trying to put you in these, different categories, and they're all based around, 4, categories. Each category has a pair. And so, I'm an ENTJ, and it just means I'm super pegged out at the bottom right. And, I'm an August baby. So I'm a Leo, and all of the crazy astrology things you would ever read about me are true. And, I'm brash and sometimes too arrogant, and, everything. Sign me up for it. But with that same professional coach I was talking about, she was telling me how everybody gets that test wrong. And it's almost like an interesting, homage to just us as human beings. We're a little bit self-centered. So people think that test is, they lead with that. I'm an ENTJ. Nobody cares. The point of the test is so someone else knows how to communicate with you. If you're so they always talk about office dynamics. Like, if you are a visual learner, just going into that person's, if you have a colleague who's a visual learner, just barging in the door and being like, hey, let's riff on something right now. Let's talk. Like, it's going to overload them. They're going to be like, whoa. We need to schedule a meeting. You need to give me some prep material. We need to have a whiteboard. Like, you just can't throw that at me right now. And it doesn't mean that they're a bad colleague. It doesn't mean that they're stupid. It just means that they receive information differently than you. And so if you know that, not to spring stuff on them. You get on their calendar. And so, I think that's an important part of communication, is just, you said it perfectly, understanding how someone receives information should inform how you give that person information. Don't be combative. Don't make them an enemy. Just understand some people, are not going to receive information the same way as you.
Yeah. My wife and I took the test. I am an ENTP. She is an ISFJ, which means we have zero overlaps in our personality. Which
that's about like me and my wife.
What was great.
Language is what is it? I'm acts of service. She's physical touch. Yeah. And she always thinks like scratch my back's gonna fix everything. I'm like, no, I want you to clean up the house.
Help me out.
I don't need the back scratch. I like it, but like, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, it's huge because that's eye-opening in terms of, on paper, my wife and I are direct opposites and we're the hardest to work, but we also have the most to gain from each other. So I've realized her strengths are my weaknesses are her strengths. And when we learned how to communicate, I was like, babe, we're going to blow this out of the water. So that is huge. I want to touch on, especially as we're talking about communication and everything. Some have figured out, some are winners, some are losers, some just haven't figured out how to win yet. Yeah. And this is kind of talking about where, you know, a generation of participation trophies. And my wife and I, we laugh because one thing we do agree on is when we have kids, we're throwing those participation trophies out. Like, not in our house.
Sign me up.
So yeah, talk about that in terms of, you know, some people are winners, some people are losers, some people just haven't figured out how to win yet, because it is an unfortunate reality. I think is like, you know, I'm thankful where growing up, my parents were very much adamant about the fact, like, hey, you don't deserve anything yet. You haven't earned anything yet. You know, I watched them work hard, and I knew it from a young age when I said, okay, you know, if you want more money, work harder. And I was like, no, my parents are the hardest working people I know, and they're not the richest people I know. So clearly something didn't connect. But I had that work ethic embedded in me at a young age. And I'm thankful for that, because it's kind of given me that desire to earn my way, earn the things that I get, or even the things that I ask for, I want to earn them. And I think that's definitely paid positive benefits for me in life. And unfortunately, I know some other people who might not have that same mentality. Talk a little bit about that perspective.
I mean, there's a lot there. Because I have, my first is due in March. Thankfully, like, I hope that I would be a good parent regardless, but, you know, I've always kind of said, like, I'm almost certain I will have only girls. Everybody, no, I think this baby's going to be a boy. And sure enough, it was a girl. So like, I know, you know, I think it's probably a good thing for me, because I feel like that's training wheels as a parent. Like, I feel like I can dote on my daughter a little bit more than I probably, and this is, you know, hey, I recognize the fact that I'm saying something that's probably misogynistic and not appropriate, and my HR director would probably shoot me. But I do feel like I can, you know, be like, with like a daughter. And like, I feel like with a boy, I'd kind of be like, stop crying. You know, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be like that ex-military archetype of a father. And everyone's like, no, you'll be a softie. And I'm not like, that's probably true. But I feel like I can be, you know, even more so with a daughter. But I question that. I wonder about that, because I don't want to. You look at so many, there's another great quote, and this would be for a woman or a man, but it's like, show me a great man who's the son of a great man, or show me a great woman who's the son of a, you know, it's like, show me a great, you know, offspring of a great parent. And it's hard when you actually think about it, because what makes people great is that grind, doing it for the first time. You weren't handed anything. And so we always want to give our children the best, but it's like, you don't want to rob them of that struggle. And so, you know, I think letting your kids, you know, Jordan Peterson talks about this, but, you know, don't interrupt your kids doing something dangerous if they're doing it carefully, something to that effect. And so, you know, when they're rock climbing or exploring or climbing up on the couch or just doing things, like, you need to let them kind of be out there on a ledge sometimes. And I think that starts to kind of promote this idea of trying and failing. And then the question is, okay, how do you support them trying again, but learning something from the failure and educating that? And a lot of that, there's a great article that I just shared with my mom, is about curiosity, about traits of, they went through this research of a bunch of high performing CEOs, and then what did their parents teach them? And we're trying to kind of quantify what was different about their childhood. And one of the biggest things that came out was curiosity, like promoting curiosity, you know, asking kids, you know, why, you know, if you go outside in a lightning storm without it, or you go outside in a rainstorm without a jacket, you know, don't just scream at them and say, no, you're stupid. Be like, why'd you do that? You know, what were the consequences of it? You know, what would you do differently next time? You know, that kind of respect for the decision-making process to understand, hey, you messed up, but there's probably a better way, and have that kind of creative thinking to understand what would you do differently. I'd grab my jacket next time. I'm not stupid. But same thing in physical activities. Hey, I'm rock climbing and I fell. What would you do differently? I'd take a different route. Okay, great. I'd also strengthen my hands a little bit. Cool, great. What else? So I think winners, losers, and the third category scares me the most, because I don't think you're even in the game. Winners and losers are winning and losing. They're busy competing. If you haven't figured out how to win yet, you probably aren't losing that much either. You're playing it so safe that you're just kind of stagnant. And that scares the shit out of me. I don't mind failure if I learn something from it. Winning is nice, but I also don't want to become complacent. And so, I think you just it's a man in the arena. You need to get in the arena and you need to just compete with yourself, compete with others, compete with everybody. One of the best quotes, I think it was, I forgot who it was now, but it was basically the pain of remaining the same. No one ever changes until the pain of remaining the same outweighs the pain of change. And it's so true. Like, sometimes if you don't move, life will move on you. And I think that's an important thing to remember, and just get out there and, don't be afraid to fail.
Yeah. My wife hates it because I say things like, hey, risk is a budget line, and she's more risk adverse than I am. And I'm like, I'm going to take some L's along the way. I've spoken on the podcast of, taking an investment, lost $30,000. And she's like, what happened? I'm like, it's probably not going to be the most money I lose in life, but we bounce back from that. And I'm like, okay, what's next? But you're right. You have to take some L's along the way, because getting through those things, my wife and I look back through the pandemic, through pay cuts, through that investment and all that, we're on the other side resilient, better than we were before. And if that problem were to come up again, we know that we could overcome. And when it comes to raising kids, I always tell my wife, it's kind of like life is a deep pool. And I don't want my kids to stay in the shallow end, and I don't want to necessarily give them floaties. I'll teach them how to swim, but I let them swallow a little water, but I won't let them drown.
There you go. I love it. I love it.
Coming towards the end really quick, just two more questions. I want to talk about the moments that define us, because, a lot of people think it's those big opportunities, right? It's like, okay, like this is my chance. Like there's a stage, the lights are on, the audience is out there. This is my chance. But I love how you're like, no. The moments that define us are much smaller than that.
And it's a collection of them. I will say the moments that define you, you will be alone. And what I mean by that is, like, even if that moment that defines you is that pitch and you're in front of other people, you're already in process at that point. Like, the moment that defines you is something else. And so I always use running analogy. A lot of people don't realize this, but I'm a runner, and I love to run, and I can run, but it's still hard. And if I don't get up and run, or if I don't run at the end of the day, no one's going to know, no one's going to care. And, there's no accolades waiting for me to do it. But whether it's raining, whether it's cold, whether I want to, there's a defining moment in that where I decide to run. And while I'm running, it's like I'm already out here now. Like I'm hurting now, I'm sweating now, and I always run out, so I have to run back. Like I don't do loops, so I can quit. And I'm like, I ran 3 miles out, I got to run 3 miles back, or it's going to be a long walk. And so, for me, there's always that internal struggle, that moment where I'm like, what's the big deal? I could go running tomorrow. I don't have to run right now. Like I run all the time. No one's watching. And that moment defines my character, that decision to see it through. I committed to saying I was going to do something. I'm going to see it through. And so I think these moments that define us are those small moments where it could go either way. You could choose to go all in or not. You could choose to decide to do it or not. It happened to me with West Point. Like West Point for me was a joke. Like I wasn't actually thinking I was going to get in. One of my good friends in high school was like, "You should go to West Point with me." I was like, "What's that?" He's like, "That's a military academy." I was like, "No, thank you." No, I was already accepted to UT. I was going to party. I had a good time in high school. I was going to have a better time in college. But then there was that existential moment. I was like, I don't like to admit I can't do something, And by him challenging me to do it, and if I said, no, I'm not going to do it, in the back of my mind, I would be saying that because I was afraid I couldn't. Even if I wasn't, I was just like, that's how I would rationalize it. I know years later, I'd be like, I was probably pardon my French, I was probably a pussy. So I ended up applying thinking I wasn't going to get in. So I was like, I'm going to apply, but I probably won't get in. So who cares? But then I got in and I was like, now I gotta go. I was like, damn it. And so, but at any point along the line, I could have, not done it. But those moments defined me. The decision to apply, the decision to go, and the decision to stick it out. I think that those are the special moments where you can no one's watching. Like if you get on stage and it's time to sing, man, that's not as defining because you're already out there. Like you're gonna be embarrassed if you don't. It's like the stuff that happens leading up to that point that got you to that stage. Those are the defining moments.
Yeah, kind of like Sun Tzu saying, the war is won and lost in preparation and in practice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
I want to make sure we have a little time to talk about Phunware because you mentioned how that came back full circle from the initial investment. And you even mentioned in terms of having that camaraderie again. And man, you're back in the trenches, right? COO, you're part of the operations. What's that been like? Talk about Phunware, the technology that you guys are really rolling out and how that's going to be kind of disrupting the market.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's an amazing company. It's amazing because of the people. We got our start building mobile applications. It was actually pretty simple. The hypothesis was let's help large brands transition from web to mobile. So we built the first NFL app. We built the first NASCAR app. We built most of Fox's mobile applications. We've done the Olympics, presidential elections, hospitals, stadiums, airports, you name it. We probably have more experience developing mobile software than almost anybody in the world. What we wanted to do was take that kind of institutional knowledge base and say, okay, where's the market really headed? Like, that's great, but a lot of people have mobile applications now. A lot of people can build mobile applications now. Let's not be sedentary, right? Let's not stagnate. Let's win or lose. Like, let's play to win. And so there's this kind of buzzword called digital transformation, but it's really what you see in the It's like if anybody's ever seen Minority Report with Tom Cruise, there's a scene where he's like walking through the mall of the future and they're like scanning his eyes and all the advertisements are personalizing to him, or Back to the Future 2 where the shark almost eats Marty McFly. That's all digital transformation. It's basically taking the technology in the real world and using it to engage people wherever they are. And so if you've been to Disneyland lately or Disney World, it's these mobile applications that show you where you are, what's around you, what's the quickest route to get to things, what's open for food, mobile ordering, all of that stuff is what we do. And so we do digital transformation for a mobile first world. Like you always hear all this talk right now about the metaverse. The metaverse is a marketing gimmick. It probably will be something, but not for a very long time because of bandwidth issues, form factor, general acceptance. I truly believe that's not what we're going to see first. I don't want to develop a virtual world to escape the real one. I want to tech enable the real world to make it a better one. And so that's what we're doing. We're tech enabling the real world. We just launched at Atlantis down in the Bahamas. We've done workplaces, hospitals. And so it's all about how do I use this to better engage you? Yeah. And so down in Atlantis, it's really cool. So now we've mapped the entire island. It's 140 acres. You can book and buy and engage anything just through the palm of your hand. And now they want to do things like augmented reality scavenger hunts for the kids and just a lot of really cool stuff that's all about kind of creating a technological overlay to the real world so that you get more out of your real world experiences.
Yeah.
It's pretty fun.
That's amazing. I feel like we've just touched the surface of that too with the augmented reality or whatnot. I think like the first widely accepted version of that was probably Pokemon Go.
Yeah, 100%.
And you're
like, exactly right. It proved that it can work. And I think that what's interesting about that is, and you said this about, just kind of, all of the work when you decide to do something on your own. When you actually do something, you stop ideating, you realize what you think might be the answer. It might not be the answer for reasons you didn't think about. So you've got to keep an open mind to things. Like, so you think about how much money, like all these people are pumping into smart glasses. Google Glass, it was a failure because of the form factor. I don't know about that. Like my issue is if I'm talking to you and you got glasses on and they're smart glasses, you're taking them off. Because like, I don't, are you recording me? Like, what are you doing? Like, people just have a natural, sense of self and privacy. And so if everybody's walking around with like camera, like now, if you walk up to me like this and you're doing this right in my face, I mean, I'm gonna have a problem with you. But, so glasses, I don't think are ever going to be widely accepted. But this phone, you can get information from it, but it's got to be kind of transient. It's like, all right, if I can like swipe this around and see like, oh, look, there's buy one, get one drinks, down the street, 2 blocks, and I can see it in augmented reality. Then I put my phone away and I walk down there. Yeah. That I think people can accept. But I don't think people are prepared to accept everybody walking around with glasses recording everybody else. I think that's just going to make people uncomfortable.
Yeah, a little too invasive or whatnot.
Yeah.
How can people follow more of the work that Phunware is doing, follow you and your journey, your story, and keep up with obviously more and more that's going to be coming down the line in the future?
Yeah, I'm easy to find. It's at Randall Crowder on Instagram. It's at Crowder Official on Twitter. I have at Randall Crowder on Twitter too, I think, but I can't remember my password to save my life. Maybe Elon can help me out with that. I have no idea. But at Crowder Official is what I actually use. LinkedIn is Randall Crowder, custom URL. And then just Phunware is phunware.com. We're on all platforms as well, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn. But yeah, it's a fun, this is where the puck is headed. This idea of contextual engagement through technology is absolutely where things are going. We've been looking at it in Hollywood forever. And so definitely follow us along, check us out. We're also traded, so we're public. So it's ticker symbol PHUN on Robinhood, Webull, TD Ameritrade, whatever. And so we've got a lot of things coming down the pipe. It's going to be exciting 2023.
Awesome, man. And I'll have those links in the show notes for folks to kind of just hop on, scroll up and follow all those. Last question is usually the heaviest one, and I save it for last because of that. But what's something that you've seen or something that's happened in your life that shapes the way you view the world as a man?
Oof. Man, that's a good question. I'm going to make sure I protect the innocent with half of these. I think it's, I won't say a specific answer, but I will go back to kind of, the military. I think a lot of people started talking about this in Vietnam. It's gotten more prevalent today, about what the military does for diversity. We still have challenges as a society, as a people, but nothing levels that playing field like getting shot at. And so watching kids from all walks of life get just thrown into the ringer together, and that shared adversity and being put in extraordinary situations where, the decisions you make, your life's on the line, your buddy's life's on the line. It was so special to watch how all the bullshit just goes away. Because as you think about it, the further I get away from my service, you get online and you just, it's hard to watch the news. It's hard to get on social media. I mean, it's so, it's so polarizing. It's so binary, Black Lives Matter, all lives matters, Republicans, Democrats, men, women, it just, people need to understand when you're dealing with the media, they get 6 times the engagement if it's a negative story. 6 times. And media is all about generating money. And so you think when you watch the news that we're just about to, be in another civil war, like we're just at each other's throats all the time. And I think we need to remember that we're not. People are a lot more similar than we think they are. You put 100 people in a room and it'll probably take you a while to figure out, who's a Republican, who's a Democrat, just put some drinks in there, some good music, and you just be hanging out with normal people who, guess what they're worried about? Raising their kids, getting to work on time, traffic, it's all these common problems. And I saw that in the military, and it was defining that when you strip away all the bullshit, we're just people. And, if you create really good environments for those people to be the best version of themselves, they will. And, you don't have to kind of go at life with this chip on your shoulder, combative, conspiracy theory. Everything is, there's always something amiss or there's a game. Most people are just trying to do the best they can with what they got. And sometimes their best may rub you the wrong way. They didn't think about you. They didn't wake up and go, I'm going to really piss off Ted today. They're just living their life. And something they did pissed you off. It wasn't intentional. And so I think it's a long-winded way of saying I love the base humanity of service. They put themselves out there. They volunteered to be in the military. They volunteered to put themselves in harm's way. They looked after each other. Didn't matter the color of your skin or the religion. I didn't see any overt, prejudices in the military, to be honest. I know they're there. But man, when you're getting shot at, it goes away real fast. You just want to know that somebody's got your back. And the things that people get pissed off at is being weak, throwing somebody under the bus, undermining people. It's none of the stuff that the media says we should fight about. It's just, can you do your job? And that's all. I try to remember that going forward. I want to see the best version of myself, but to do that, I also have to see the best version in other people.
Yeah. Try and bring out the best in other people. And my friend and I say all the time, I just want to be an asset, not a liability.
100%.
Earn my spot.
100%.
Here. Randall, this has been amazing, man. And like I said, I don't mind going further than 30 minutes. We went about 50 minutes on this because you were just hitting it. And I think our audience got a lot of value from you today. So I just want to say thank you, not just for your service, but for the time that you gave us, the insights and a little bit of your journey. So we appreciate it.
I appreciate you. And thank you for having me. I bet we could chop it up for a long time. And if you're ever in Austin, let me know. Get you some barbecue and share a beverage, but anything I can do for you, let me know. I really appreciate everything you're doing.
Absolutely, man. And I'm going to recap some of the gems you left along the way really quick, because I know some people are driving or they're cleaning while listening. So just keep your eyes on the road. I'll take care of the rest, guys. It got real when you mentioned that where the training at West Point, everything was already dialed in. The training was already dialed in. It was there and it got real. Just a reminder for folks that always act like it's real, because in life, you don't rise to the occasion. You fall to the level of your preparation. Startup Nation, just wanted to say that again for the book recommendation. I heard you say it before. I read up on it before. I'm going to add that to my reading list. And then good ideas come from everywhere. For the leaders out there, whether you're a leader in your family, leader in your business, or maybe you're in the trenches in your business, you could lead up the chain of command and identify where those good ideas are. And if you have a good idea, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, guys. Speak up and share it, because you never know where that could lead. Access to a mentor and emulate a role model. The mentor you have access to, you emulate a role model and put yourself in the position to be mentored. Sometimes if you have your ego up, if you have your walls up, you don't have that invitation out there for someone to come pour into you and give you the gifts that they've learned along the way. And then put yourself out there, obviously for the mentorship, but also receive and give information. Not just understanding your personality type, but those around you. Your emotional intelligence to communicate differently with how people receive information can take you leaps and bounds, not just in business, not just in your workplace, but also in your relationships and in your marriage. What makes people great? That adversity. I know we've come from a generation, a lot of us listening probably were used to those participation trophies. That's great. Congratulations. But understand that the adversity, the grind, the discomfort, and the hard stuff is what makes the fruit worth it, makes the fruit that much sweeter. And anything worth having is not easy to obtain. Take some L's out there. If you're winning at life, you're probably not trying anything new. If you haven't learned how to win or lose, it's okay to take some L's, because I either win or I take a lesson. I don't necessarily lose. I take lessons, and you learn those lessons and you get back in the ring, keep those hands up, and then put those punches and make sure they land. And finally, the small moments when you're alone, those small decisions, those are going to be the defining moments that will lead you to where you want to be. When you're on that stage, when you're in front of that camera, when you're with your family, those are the people that are going to remember the outcome. But the decision in those moments were well before that. Man, Randall.
Can I add one more, because you just did it?
Go for it.
And I got to do it. I'm sorry to prolong this, but what you just did I think maybe 5% of the population even understands what you did, much less does it. And so, and I've done a lot of these, but it doesn't matter if it's a sales pitch, doesn't matter if it's a fight with your partner. Starting out a conversation, trying to understand, what is this conversation going to be? How can we frame the conversation? What do you hope to get out of it? What can I provide to it? And then having that conversation, but being an active listener, and being such an active listener that you can recap the conversation when it's done. Here's what I heard. Here's kind of what I gathered, what I gleaned from it. Here's some of my takeaways. That's a sales pitch for anybody who's ever sold anything. As human beings, I always tell people we want to be seen. We want to know that we're seen. That's how we validate ourselves. And so it's just like I say this to my sales team all the time. It's that cheers moment. You walk into a bar. I did this at Soup Peddler just today. I've been going there for a couple months. I get sometimes a smoothie, sometimes a soup. And the woman who I've never had a single conversation with her, I was about to tell her, like, Randall, right? I'm like, wow, you remembered. Cool. I mean, thousands of people come through here, but you remembered my name. You're like, well, you're kind of easy to pick out. But I'm like, yeah, but I could understand it. You remembered my face, but you remember my name. Sometimes people will remember your order. That kind of like, I was actively seeing you as a human being. I understood something about you, something that was important to you, and I recalled it. That is the best way to win friends and influence people. And so what you just did, very few people do. So I don't care if somebody on here wants to start their own podcast, if somebody wants to have an interview or try to do a sales pitch, you should always be recapping every conversation at the end to make sure you're aligned. And then we wouldn't do this at this step other than let's keep in touch. But then line out next steps. Hey, when are we going to do the next thing? By when are we going to do it? Who's responsible for doing it? So I just want to commend you for being an active listener, for summarizing everything that we talked about because you were active listening. That is a takeaway that everyone listening to this should emulate and 100% begin to do today.
Man, that means a lot. And that's huge, brother. And I appreciate that. Thank you. I received that. And for the listeners and the people watching on YouTube, I hope you receive it as well, because we want to provide value here. And that's definitely a great tip. And I'm glad I'm doing it. And I'm going to keep on doing it moving forward as well.
Keep doing it.
Yeah. And the last thing I'm going to ask of the audience is to share this with a friend, because you know that they're going to get value from it. I mean, you just heard the last 55 minutes. So please share this with someone you know can get value from it. Hit that subscribe button to get a new episode each and every single week. And please leave us a rating to let us know how we're doing, because the only way we improve is from hearing from you. We appreciate the time, guys. Thank you so much for rocking with us all the way to the end. And as we always say, everybody wants the sunshine, but they don't want the rain. But you can't get the pleasure without first the pain. Let's grow.